The other is use videos only if absolutely necessary in a presentation, regardless of how cool it is, or in this case, how cool he is, right? No, just kidding. Videos take away the attention from you. So if there's something that cannot be replicated, you're doing something at the top of the Himalayas. Pretty hard to explain that without showing what it looks like on the top of the Himalayas. But don't do it unless there's something that absolutely requires a video. And if it's a video, make it short. The other thing is don't do this. Don't squeeze too much onto one slide where there's no way they're going to read it. Worse than them reading it is they're not watching you. While you're reading to them or summarizing to them or maybe making a great point, they're not listening to you. They're reading the slide. So don't squeeze too much on a slide. The other is SWOT and other paradigms, frameworks, 2x2 matrices are great for analysis, but that doesn't mean that they're great for presentations. Here from the SWOT analysis, you might have 2 or 3 key takeaways from what did you learn from SWOT about your competitive position or things that you should focus on as big opportunities. Well, then why are you going to go through multiple data points with 4 quadrants to make a simple point of 3 or 4 things? Tell you what, go for the 3 or 4 things that matter and leave the SWOT in your backup slides. Next, you want to be fancy. You dominate how to use fonts. Is that good? Because you can, and you have a great library of fonts on your presentation software. Or animation. If you're presenting with something like this, probably right now, you're not looking at me. You're not reading the middle that says you and your message. You're looking at this crazy man on the right walking, and he's not going anywhere. So animation, I've seen this from very accomplished presenters. They think it's cool. They think it makes a point, and it's actually neither. Well, maybe it's cool, but it does not make the point. Because if there's animation, you're probably still looking at that damn thing, not me, right? If there's animation, we as human beings are drawn to the animation. And AC has kind of done neural research to say this goes back to our caveman days where we're watching out for a tiger to pounce upon us and we're watching for movement because it could be danger. Well, hopefully no tiger is in your room about to pounce on you. So don't create distractions. So don't use animation because they will distract. Hey, look at me, not that. See what I mean? All right. The other is busy backgrounds. It's cool, it's psychedelic, like what's going on, but it's busy. Now, just because you can make something look busy or fancy doesn't mean you should because it's busy. Next is now you have something more abstract or opaque or maybe with something just in the background like a watermark. Does that add to the message or is it distracting? The other is you want to be branded. You want to have Halt. You want to have the perfect pitch book cover or the tagline of Halt from a few years ago or who you are like Indigo Partners or what is this presentation? It's planning and pitch. What slide is this? 9,489th slide. I hope not. What is the date? Now, all this has some relevance, of course, but it's clutter, right? So do things that you must have there and keep the rest out of it or put it in the appropriate spot, perhaps at the end. There are other distractions, clip art, copyrighted imagery, gratuitous animation, word art from Microsoft, or lots of bullets and dashes, or a lot of transitions from slide to slide. Prezi, although it's cool, makes me dizzy sometimes watching the screen flip around on its axes and move around. So is that adding to the message and the logic flow? Or is it distracting or superfluous if not distracting? The other point is that Microsoft has default charts. And you look at this chart, what is it telling me? Is it telling me what flavor of ice cream is most popular? Or is it talking about the demographics of who likes what flavor? So the idea or the takeaway is that what is the insight that you have and want to share? So then create a graph that makes that insight, not a whole bunch of other ancillary insights. Focus on the message and make the graph tell that message, nothing else. If you're really interested in the flavor of the ice cream that matters, do the flavors of the ice cream in a bar chart that shows percentage breakout of chocolate, strawberry, vanilla. If it's really more about the demographics of who's eating ice cream, then do something of that nature. But again, know the message and then have the chart be the simplest way to convey that message. The next slide I call, huh? What do you mean, huh? Is it the iPhone 5S has COGS of 57 and it's greater than 5? Or what is the point here? I mean, it's kind of good looking. We call these donut slides, and then it's got colors, but what is it telling me? It doesn't make sense, right? So let's compare these donut slides to the next slide. Oh, it's the casing, stupid. In other words, we have two versions of the iPhone, the 5C and the 5S, and they have different costs. But when you look at the comparison of the costs, they're all pretty close except for one, casing. So the big difference in cost of the 5S versus the 5C is the casing. So here, what is that? I mean, you couldn't tell. It's the same data, by the way. What is the difference in the cost of making the 5S versus a 5C? The answer is the casing. So this particular graph tells the story of what you want to tell. It doesn't mean what is the total cost or other composition of cost for a phone. We're trying to figure out what is the difference in the cost and what's driving the difference in the cost between the 5C and the 5S. Here are some examples of charts you can do in Microsoft, but there are ones to avoid. First, you have 3D perspective. Well, does that really add much? Then you have 3D and a graph, then it's really hard to read. Like, is it the back wall or the side wall that matter? Then you have these little cones that have the peak on the cone. Like, what's that really do? And then you have false precision on the bottom left. They're out to the 0.000% precision on a nowhere near that precision representation. Next is by dollar amount. See this for dollars. You'll see $60 million expanded to the $0.01 to the penny. Really? Do we care about the pennies? So why don't we just call it 60 and say dollars and millions? That's a lot easier than trying to figure out how many zeros there are. And the right, isn't the message the bar charts, not really the heat lamp on the left side or the graphic in the middle? So those are all distracting from the point. The point is really comparing the three different types of sea creatures. Let's avoid graphs that do not make the point in a clean and a transparent way. Here's a summary of the common mistakes we just looked at, so don't make these. Title, what is the insight from the slide? Then make that the title in a short, succinct way. Axes, be objective, don't exaggerate, no Time magazine. Then let's avoid graphs that are multiple on one page, unless they're related to one point, otherwise don't do it. Use videos only if they're essential and quick. Don't squeeze too much, especially text on one slide. Avoid SWOT because it's more of a tool than a communication of a key point. Use the slide for the key point. Avoid fancy fonts, animation, backgrounds, watermarks, excessive referencing, and other distractions that take away from your message. And then graphs that confuse rather than enlighten should be gotten rid of. Charts are powerful, but not all charts are created equal. And finally, there are chart errors that we make because they're just mistakes and they're harder to read and they don't really serve your purpose. And this was one with the weird objects like the cones, or false precision like decimal places or percentages, or chart junk like that very colorful but hard to read slide. So these are mistakes to avoid.